Hello, guys. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
All righty, Jackson, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. So, my name is Jackson, and live down here in South Georgia, and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and heavily involved in sports, working out, some wrestling, training, jujitsu, stuff like that are kind of my hobbies and everything. But we started a podcast about 3 years ago, and the title of the podcast is Saints in the South. And we basically study the scriptures for 30 minutes to an hour or so, and then we share that with the world, and with as many people will listen. So that's a little bit about me.
Yep, I'm Marcus, also from South Georgia, #1 football team in the nation right now. Just putting that out there. Yeah, a lot of the same background.
Humble brag.
Yeah, humble brag. Hashtag. But yeah, also member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and Jackson reached out to me about this podcast, and we jumped on with it. We've been friends for a long time, back to high school days, and we're very old. So, but it's been a long time. But yeah, just hanging out with him. Actually, some of my hobbies, I love music. I love rock and roll, country, things like that. Actually play in a band, play drums, I play guitar, things like that. Some I'm not saying I'm super good, but I do that stuff.
Super good.
He's good.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm super good, but
Yeah, not super good, but maybe good.
all right. So yeah, I'm Kenny. I'm also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and friends with Jackson and Marcus down here in good old South Georgia. I also have a hobby of music, and yeah, I've actually played in Marcus's band with him a couple times.
Plays bass.
before.
Old bass player.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm super awesome, but I do that.
Awesome's good enough.
We get it too.
And yeah, I actually I work in mental health currently, and so I am kind of passionate about psychology, and I'm interested in the intersection of religion and philosophy and psychology. And I'm not definitely not a scholar in all those areas. I'm not nearly as knowledgeable as many other people, but I am interested in it nonetheless. So I enjoy discussions about those types of things.
Cool. So I am an atheist, by which I mean I believe that there's no reason to believe in a god or supernatural of any kind. Could you tell me some of the reasons you believe there are for belief in such an entity? And I'd like to tell you my thoughts on those positions, hear your thoughts on what I think.
All right, who wants to go? Whoever
Okay.
jump in, or
So I'll jump in first, I guess. I think for faith is obviously a very, very, very personal thing. And so for me personally in my life, I've seen and experienced things that have given me what I feel is indisputable proof of a higher power. And although I understand that faith by definition deals with the metaphysical, like, so there's not it, and it kind of irks me, to be honest, when I see other people, just trying, posting videos and things, or trying to prove God, or prove that, it's like, you can't prove God any more than you can disprove God. That's not anything. The moment you try to do that, you're treading on ice. It's not going to work, because faith is and not only have the things that I've seen and experienced caused me to have a strong belief in God, but I've also seen, and I know the statistics of people who have a strong religious faith often are healthier in certain ways. They're when it comes to recovery, when it comes to mental health, physical health, addiction, the statistics show that people with strong religious faith often have higher rates of recovery and report higher rates of well-being and other things. So it's kind of like I have on one hand the experiences that to me seem to make me believe that there is a God and believe that, that all the things that go along with that there is a eternal part of us that lives on after we die and all those kind of things. So there's a practical aspect to it in my mind that shows me that this is, in my opinion, a better way. And I've actually, unlike Jackson and Marcus, I'm a little bit more hard-headed than they are, I think. And I actually
That's
spent,
why you're bald. I'm just kidding.
yeah. I spent a kind of I could say I forgot about God or turned my back on God or whatever it was, and kind of just lived in the world. And I've lived the life of an atheist. And I've went through different periods of my life where I've attended different churches and I've studied religion quite a bit. And I guess for me, the path that I've chosen right now is, from what I can see, is the best path possible. And I guess from my experience, I don't feel like there's anything else in this life that this life has to offer that's better, I guess, overall, as far as just quality of life and, happiness and all the things that go along with that.
Gotcha. I do want to see, Marcus, I think there's a she bear behind you. 2 Kings 2:24, making fun of the bald guy. Didn't God send the bears to go maul people who did that?
Yes,
There
and she
you go.
did, yeah. That's true. Yeah, I got to look out. I got bear spray. I'm good.
So, so about the personal testimony thing, like from the studies I've seen, that I would agree that religious people in religious countries do better in well-being. But when the studies are done in majority secular countries, it seems the opposite is the case. It seems like people who hold a position that mirrors that of the majority position, have a larger community, in general, have a better quality of life. And the people who are isolated and don't have a community to be a part of are the ones who have a lower quality of life. And so I don't think it's specifically related to religion in and of itself. It's more related to, are you tied into the community at large, and do you have representation of people with similar values? And so I think that the studies I've seen are more representative of that. If you hold a majority position, or a position that you can relate to in a larger community, that's what benefits your well-being, not specifically religion in those contexts.
Right.
That's why I think that when we look at most of the Western countries, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Japan, Norway, Iceland, all of those countries except Iceland is mostly Christian, so not that one. The other ones, all the other ones,
Right.
are majority non-religious people, and they have the highest quality of life, the lowest crime rate, the longest life expectancy, the happiest, the highest on the happiness index, the highest wealth, most representation, most welfare, social security. They have all the bests of everything that we can think of, as far as I can tell. And so it seems more like the studies that you mentioned are more relevant to those that have the largest religious communities. But when you go outside of that, it seems more like that the standard to use to assess what generates the greatest quality of life seems to be more secular values and technology and wealth, more so than religious ideology.
Right. I think when we're talking about religion, I'm thinking of the principles that religion teaches. I'm not talking about just our religion, and even like Muslims or Jewish or whatever, Christian, whatever you want, any of them. I think as long as there's good principles out there, don't steal, don't kill, things like, obviously you're going to have a better community, so, the principles that come along with religion, or at least the principles that come along with believing that there's something more than just where we are now, that does absolutely help. But I get what you're saying too. It doesn't have to be tied to a specific religion for it to be a good community. It's just good principles, and truth is truth. But we've always said truth is truth. It doesn't matter if it comes from a Baptist church or our church, or from a science, college, or, so living healthy, not killing people, not robbing banks, that all goes towards building a good, strong community, good law abiding citizens. And, and you can find that in religion, and you can find it in people that are just, which I saw, I think, something you did, as you say, you're an atheist, but you say you help with was it an apartment building? What was it? It was I can't remember exactly, something you helped with their rent or something.
That's the goal,
income.
to start an apartment building
So
and offer it at low income. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's good stuff. I mean, that's, I mean, atheists can do that. Members of our church can do that, whatever. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. And it does uplift
Yeah.
others. And that's what
So,
it's all about,
yeah. So you point to having a strong community, and having a higher success rate if you're tied into a stronger community. My thought on that is that we believe, maybe, and one of the things that maybe sets our church apart a little bit from other Christian churches is that we have a heavy belief in a premortal life. So we believe that we lived with God before we actually came here to earth. And so we, as a result, and in our beliefs, we have strong family beliefs, and that there's a need for a strong family. Getting back to your comments, a strong community as well. And so I think a lot of things that we may not even realize or give credence to ends up, you can tie back to that belief in God. God is family. That's what it's about. We believe that we are ultimately here striving to return to live with Him, to have an eternal family. We have big beliefs in that as well. So, and many times, whenever we may have certain inclinations about things and may not necessarily realize that those things are actually tied back to God.
So how did those exactly tie back to God? Because I'm, of course, as an atheist, I think it's more evolutionary property that we built communities as a means to survive better and be more successful in interacting with the environment. And so from my perspective, I don't see a reason to think God is a part of that dynamic, and that we can explain that better with secular means. And those secular means seem to be more descriptive of reality than the religious texts, as far as I can tell.
So it ties back to, again, get back to our beliefs of having an eternal family, that we're not here to exist as individuals, right? But to strive to have strong communities, and it's why we have churches, to help have a strong community. And so our belief in ultimately having an eternal family, that's where it ties back to God. And again, it comes down, our beliefs and faith and everything. So, and you're stronger, and a lot of this stuff you can apply secularly as well, for sure. I mean, it's proven that communities are stronger as when working together, right? Whether it's states, countries, and throughout the world, you help each other out, having a strong community. That, in our belief, ties back to God and having a strong family.
So one question I normally have when talking about like afterlives or pre-lives would be, couldn't we just say the same thing under atheism? We could say that there is an afterlife, or say that there is a pre-life that we just haven't discovered yet of some kind. And those alternatives seem to me equally as supported as positing a God to accomplish the same thing of having an afterlife or a pre-life. So why would we believe that having an afterlife is more likely under a God than under naturalism?
That's an interesting concept, though. I don't know if I've ever even heard anyone propose that idea. So I would be curious as to if someone were to propose the concept of, I guess when you talk about an afterlife or premortal life, that infers the existence of an eternal soul, of a part of us that lives outside of our physical body. So if that were to exist, then I guess what would be the epistemological framework that would undergird that whole thing if there were no higher power, if there were no deity or deities that would be associated with that?
Sure. Like, I think you mean ontological, like what epistemology is. How we know.
Yes.
So
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
There are many different versions of ontologies that could ground a heaven or hell or any kind of afterlife or pre-life. One of the most common ones is the Buddhist tradition of a karmic field. There's just a karmic field out there. It's not a conscious entity, and this field can impart souls and give souls reincarnation and afterlives and divinity and those kinds of things. And that's just one of infinitely many possibilities. You could say that there's actually a soul that we haven't discovered yet in science, and it's there, and your consciousness just permeates the universe when you die, and so you can have an afterlife or a pre-life or whatever. And so I think that there are an infinite number of possibilities of ways that we could have lives after death, or bodily death. But my concern is more that there's no evidence for me to see any of such things. Equally, there is no evidence for a religious foundation as there is for a scientific foundation. And we could, under the scientific paradigm, posit this thing, say that there is such a thing with no evidence. And I think that that would be equally as supported as the religious context. And so I think one of the big problems with the religious dynamic is that they say science can't do X or science can't do Y, when really we could, but we don't tend to go beyond the evidence to do such things. We tend to wait until we have evidence. We could solve all of those problems on an objective basis of morality, meaning, purpose, all of those things. We could posit laws of nature that we haven't discovered to do all of those things. But the problem is that we tend not to go beyond the evidence. Whereas what I think is religious ideologies do go beyond the evidence. They say there is an afterlife or there is a particular deity or something. And if there isn't sufficient evidence to support that, to me, it seems like a dubious claim that we probably shouldn't be making.
Okay, but I feel like I said a minute ago, from my perspective anyway, religion by definition deals only with the metaphysical. So if there's anything that can be physically observed or physically measured in any way, that is outside of the realm of religion, and that falls within the realm of the scientific process that we have, which all science is our best method we have so far of being able to observe and make assumptions about the world around us and come up with the best theories and prove or disprove or so for me, I guess I think would agree with what you said, that if come up with a scientific or secular version of things that can't be proven or disproven, I'd say that would be just as valid, because by definition religious claims cannot be proven or disproven. Existence of God to you any more than anyone can disprove God. You can provide explanations for natural phenomena, and you can provide explanations for things that make sense, but that still, to me, it still doesn't disprove the existence of some kind of higher power in general. And also, I would say one other thing too. I know when you were talking about the morality, using that another thing that's interesting to me is that religion, whether you, and this is a little bit off the side, but religion, whether you believe in a literal God or higher power or not, I feel like religion has by far been the most positive force in all of human society through all of history, because religion has been kind of a meta truth boiled down of things that people have found to be true. So you can either look at religion from one or two ways. You can look at religion as there is a God and God created us and he's handed down the laws, or you could look at it as God is something that was created by man. But even if religion is something that was created by man, it's something that was created by human their world and seeing what works best, what makes people happy, what makes people healthy, what makes cultures and civilizations flourish. And it's been kind of embodied in this religious thing. And it's kind of like when Nietzsche, the whole God is dead thing, it's something that Jordan Peterson talks about a lot, how when people hear that phrase God is dead, they think of it as a condemnation of faith, whereas it was not intended to be that. When Nietzsche said God is dead, if you read the rest of the quote, he's actually he's talking about the tragedy of people leaving behind religious faith, even though he wasn't religious. He didn't believe in God himself, but he understood that the religious framework that culture was built upon was what kept everything in line and kept everything working. And his concern was, once we knock the legs out from under that, what do we have to replace it with? And so I feel like we're kind of struggling. And in some cases, secularism has been able to provide alternatives that are able to provide community and provide a sense of stability. But throughout history, it has been religion that's kind of filled that need.
Yeah, I would agree with that mostly. So I think that religion, back when its incarnation 3,000 years ago, played a huge role in benefiting humanity and moving us to a better moral system, better political economic system that had a hugely positive outcome. That's why it's so prevalent today, because it did have a very positive outcome compared to the previous ideologies of the time frame. But I do think today there are better ideologies. You mentioned you thought religion was the biggest force for good in the world. Now, I would put it at science and technology. I think those are a much greater force for good in the world by many orders of magnitude. And I think that's why many people have left religion, because religion isn't doing as much as these more human enterprises. Like my favorite example is Norman Borlaug. Norman Borlaug invented genetically modified wheat and rice. And that one invention is known to have saved over 1 billion lives on its own. And that's far more than what I think the cumulative effect of pretty much all religious institutions have had less of an impact there. Specifically like healthcare, government-based healthcare, NHS, Social Security, welfare, those kinds of things have also saved about 1 billion lives in total, which again seems to dwarf all of the effects of any churches and the amount they've helped. They have helped, and they have done many good things for people in poverty, and helping the homeless, and giving people food and childcare and all kinds of things. But the cumulative effect of any scientific enterprise, electricity, just general relativity for science, and doing satellites and different kinds of guiding people out how to do things and how to build planes, like all of the different penicillin scientific inventions, each one of them seems to do as much or greater good than the entire institution of churches as a whole in the world. And so I'd probably put science and technology as a far greater force for good than religion was. But I do agree with you that at the time period, religion was probably the greatest influence in the world 3,000 years ago, and had more of a positive influence than any other ideology at the time period.
And see,
Yes.
that's
So those things you were talking about, though,
Yeah.
there's several things you cited there when you cited like healthcare and the welfare, education, and those things. So the things you're citing now are just imitations of what religion was doing, because for several thousand years it was almost exclusively the role of religion that would provide social programs and social welfare. And in the United States, even like the schools, like the vast majority of, for a long time, the only public schools were public schools that were founded by churches and by I'm trying to think, I think, was it the Methodists, I think, that out west were like founding public schools like crazy. And so these things going on that the faith that these faith groups were doing. And I feel like people could look at that and say, wow, this is a good idea. Maybe we could implement this through the use of government, or through the use of, non-governmental organizations that are secular in nature. So I think maybe it could be argued that the systems that are in place now might be set up in a way that are more effective than they used to be. But I still feel like those systems the credit could be given to religion initially, because it was the religious organizations that were providing those services for quite a long time, through most of human history up until, right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily separate technology,
science and religion.
Science and religion. I don't separate it.
I believe they can be joined together.
They can coexist, exactly, and join.
Yeah.
I think because of inspiration, and
From a higher power, from God,
the higher power,
right,
that we are guided. I mean, so for example, this conversation that we are able to have today, right now, through technology. Yes, it was developed through science, through technology and creations. But I believe that this invention is inspired by God as a better way to spread His word throughout the entire world.
And really, just his principles of the good things in life that we're talking about, that build strong communities. It's easy to get caught up in saying the religion and that we're talking about this one entity thing that is the end all be all of how to I don't know, to do everything perfectly and all these things. There's so much good that comes from all different religions, and these good principles, all these wonderful things that happen, like Jackson's saying, and they're inspired. These are inspired people to do good things and invent things. You mentioned penicillin or genetically grown rice. I mean, that stuff is for the benefit of humanity, and we believe that God is our Father and that He wants us to have the absolute best that we can have, however that happens, and He can inspire people to do those things. I think that's where, you may not hear that from other religions, that we say, yeah, we believe that science is important, and we believe that it's good heart surgeons that go out and do these crazy heart surgeries, and that's absolutely amazing. But we also accompany that with that we believe those people are inspired, and those people they learn, they have this inspiration from God to do those things. I think that's
many of those people are quite religious themselves as well, and
yeah,
they themselves
right.
like Ben Carson. Ben Carson is was for a while was the leading pediatric neurosurgeon on earth, and he's done some amazing. I learned about a lot of stuff that he's done when I took a child psychology class, as far as brain surgeries that he's done. He's done surgeries on babies in the womb, and he is a man of deep faith, deep religious conviction, and he credits a lot of his ability to God and to his faith.
So I think that's what we're saying. We recognize that. We recognize the science. We recognize the, and then we just, for our tendency, what we believe in our church is that we believe that type of stuff. Yeah, we have our own intellect. I don't want it to sound like I'm saying God puts, like I'm a robot and God puts that into me to do these things. I believe that we're intellectual beings, that He created us to have agency, to choose, and to learn and grow for ourselves. That's what we believe we're here to do, is actually gain knowledge and learn, and to become more like the example of Jesus Christ, which is, the whole purpose of Him having a church is to have it established, to be able to do these things and learn these things and go out and serve others and love our neighbors and all those types of things. And so we have our minds, our own minds. We have our own hearts and our own, to do these things. And we look to inspiration and guidance from God to help us with those things. So yes, science, all these things, that's part of life,
So there's a few things I wanted to pick up on there. One was that you said that science and religion are compatible. While I agree, I don't think you can say that science is a result of religion, because science was done far before religious influences, and many of the greatest scientists were secular. And as we go future, the amount of scientists that are secular today are greater than they ever have been, and the most successful scientists are majority secular. And so it seems like science as an institution can be done entirely separately from religion. You don't
Isn't
use
that
it
just
all.
as a reflection of the culture, though, Tom? Because for much of history, most of the prominent scientists were deeply religious people.
Well, I think that's
most
part of
the
the culture.
scientists were you look at people like Gregor Mendel. Actually, Gregor Mendel was the pioneer of modern genetics, and he was what, a monk, a priest. I know he was very deeply religious. He was actually, he lived, his life dedicated to his religious belief. And for people like Gregor Mendel, he didn't see any conflict between, science and faith. I know for him, and that was there was lots of what is the oh gosh, the scientist that discovered oxygen, that first discovered oxygen. I know he was very so there's lots and lots of scientists who were.
I think his last name was Air. I think Air, maybe.
Yeah.
Oxygen. You got oxygen.
But no, so I guess I feel like that the religious, whether you're religious or not, and this is just my opinion, is it does not affect your ability to be a good scientist at all, because many scientists have been deeply religious people. There's devout Christians. There's been many devout Muslims who are scientists who made great scientific discoveries. Also, many great atheists. So, in my opinion, from what I've seen, I don't think that your faith or lack thereof really has any bearing on your ability to be a good scientist, though.
Right. So I would agree there. They're separate entities. That was kind of the point I was making, is that science isn't a result of religion. It's like you can be a good scientist whether or not you play golf, whether or not you're a golfer makes no difference to
yeah.
whether or not you're a good scientist. And the same thing applies to religion. Religion really has no impact on science in that context. There are some people who are inspired by it and some people who were stopped by it, who were unable to make progress because of their religious belief, like Newton, when he said that when he was calculating the calculus of the orbits of all the different planets in the solar system. He said it was so complicated it couldn't be done except by a higher power of some kind. And then Laplace came along and did it and said, yeah. And Napoleon asked him, where is God is in this hypothesis? And he said, I had no need of that hypothesis. So religion has done both good and bad in benefiting science. But my point is that which is a better positive influence for the world? I'd say science, hands down. Science wins. Science is the better one. If I had to choose between
and we
science
say
and
religion.
Right.
Right. No, but yeah, no. And like I say, I mean, I understand where you're coming from there. I respect that. And you say science came first. I would probably agree, but I think it was just because there was a loving Heavenly Father that used what we call science to do things way below, as far as forming the earth and creating the planets, and that's His power, and we call it science, and other things. That's, like I say, that's just the way we believe it, the way that it goes on, with how we do it. But yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. It's,
And I'd like to address something you said, Tom. You were talking about, the way that certain people are actually hindered in their progress because of religious beliefs. And to me, that actually, it kind of segues nicely into the point of the question that you posed to us initially. Is when you reached out to us, the question was, if I remember correctly, something to the effect of, why do we believe in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or Latter-day Saint Christianity above other things? And one of the reasons for me personally is that I feel like the church is very, very different than many other Christian denominations and religions, is that the way that we, okay, number one, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is one of the only churches that I know of that actively promotes secular education and believes that education, all true knowledge comes from God. And if you have a knowledge of astronomy, or you have a knowledge of chemistry, or if you have a knowledge of biology, you are, in a sense, becoming closer to God, because you are gaining knowledge. And so we see the world a little bit differently. I know there are certain
It's not mine.
is that God calling? I'm just
was it
it's not mine. It wasn't mine. I don't know.
Is it Jackson? Anyway, no, I feel like
Jason's like, yes.
So I do
son.
see.
I apologize. My son is trying to call me, and it's coming through my.
Oh, it's
No problem.
That
It
dang
was
technology.
Jackson. Wah, wah, wah. So anyway, no, like I guess, like, to put it in condense it though a little bit, I feel like the church, and once again, when we talk about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I know for many Christians, when the phrase quote unquote the church refers to believers in general, like all people who claim to worship Jesus Christ, whereas in our vernacular, when we say quote unquote the church, we are generally referring to our church, which we believe to be the same church that Jesus Christ established on the earth when He was on the earth, that He restored through the prophet Joseph Smith. And so within the church, is that Jackson again? Jackson. So within the church, there is, like, as a matter of fact, I know one of my favorite quotes from Joseph Smith was, I can't quote it directly, but at one point he said something to the effect of, if any of the elders of the church who are speaking who are educated in any of the sciences, if they're educated in chemistry or astronomy, if they feel inclined to speak on these things in a church meeting, then they should do so, because all these things are from God. And so he believed that all knowledge, all knowledge of science is basically just knowledge of truth. When we figure things out, about the natural environment around us, then we are, in a sense, becoming closer to God because we are growing in knowledge. And we believe that that's a big part of our purpose is to progress. So one of the things that sets us apart, that Jackson already said, is that we believe in a premortal life. And so, and I know another thing that most other Christians believe, that we are created beings, in a sense, no different than animals. We're no different than a dog or a lion or anything else. But when we get, quote unquote, saved, when we accept Jesus Christ, then we're kind of adopted into the family and we become children of God. Whereas we, as Latter-day Saints, believe that all people are children of God. Every single human being who has ever lived and whoever will live are literal children, spirit children of God. And what he wants for us is to progress and to grow in knowledge, to grow in love, to grow in those things and become more like him. And so I guess I'm kind of going back to what you were saying is I feel like, for me, one of the things that separates, our theology from most other religions or most other Christian denominations is the focus on progress, on growing in knowledge, growing in wisdom, growing in all these things, growing in empathy and love, and just becoming better people. And so it kind of is, I feel like we are diametrically opposed in some ways to some of the other religious groups that, I'm not going to say anybody in particular, but I know that there are some religious groups whose members are kind of held back because they don't believe in certain things, and they don't believe in medical technologies, or they don't believe in this and don't believe in that. And that, I think, is a big difference between us and some other religious groups.
Well, sure, but my question is, why do we need the religion for that? It seems like the secular worldview is all about progress. We like science very, very much. We like healthcare and welfare very, very much. And you guys seem to be attributing, as typical of many religious people, is that they like to attribute science and healthcare and welfare to religious identities of the past. But at the same time, it seems like it's kind of an excess addition. Like, we don't need it. We just get rid of the religion and still have all of the good stuff. All of the healthcare, all of the social security is done by a secular government that is separate from the church. All the science is done from secular scientists that is separate from the church. You don't need the church at all. It seems to apply nothing to any of these things. And so I would consider them separate entities. These are you mentioned that churches did much of the healthcare in the past, and that's true, but it didn't start with churches. Churches simply took those ideas from communities of people who were helping the people in need at the time period and tried to make them into a ideology or a principle that is grounded in their religious beliefs. But it didn't start with religion. Helping other people has been a thing since the crescent absent of it's human nature. It's kind of like we've always been like, we should probably care for that person who's dying over there, not just let them die.
Right.
But when you go back that far, though, there's not really a separation between the religious beliefs in the community, though, because this was before science. Most everybody's their beliefs about the world around them were influenced by their religious faith. So I don't feel like it'd be accurate or fair to say that that's to separate that from because faith historically in the past was a much larger influence in people's lives. And a lot of that was because we didn't have the science.
Well, we'll just interrupt for a second there. So I'm not quite sure what you mean, because we see helping others in animals, like elephants help people who are injured in their tribe. Chimpanzees help people who are injured in their tribe. Dolphins do. They don't have religion. And as an atheist, I think that we evolved from animals similar to those animals. And so it seems much more reasonable to believe that we had social inclinations to help others before we had any religious beliefs whatsoever. And so I think that it's pretty rational to believe that the community aspect of helping one another is something that far predates any religious beliefs by a huge margin. Same with science. We can see many different animals using tools. Chimpanzees use sticks to hurt other chimpanzees, as well as to dig out termites from the ground and to dislodge fruit from high trees. So both science and acts of service to help other people seem to be things that predate any religious belief at all and are just ingrained in community aspects of helping one another.
Yeah. Yeah, so let me jump in right here, Kenny. So this, I think the easiest way to answer that is it comes down to a belief that we have that every living thing has in it what we refer to as the light of Christ. Every living thing. Okay, whether you're a termite or whether you are a human being, everything has the light of Christ. And that is where that derives from. The desire to help others, the desire for elephants to help their own and to help in everything, that simply comes down to a belief of and faith that we see and in our scriptures, that's what it teaches, is that the light of Christ is in absolutely everything. And then man comes along and institutes religion and things like that, and churches and church buildings, right? And we lose sight of the meaning and the purpose of the light of Christ, and that is to ultimately help everybody and build strong communities and ultimately help us all hopefully one day pass on through this life and be with eternal families after this life. So it comes down to our belief in light of Christ being in everything.
Yeah, I think that's. I was just going to say, just to help understand kind of where we're coming from, is what we believe is, and kind of go along with what Jackson's saying, is that when you say before religion, to me, religion is that word. What I'm thinking of is the doctrine of Christ, the things that he taught. So what we believe, just really quickly in a nutshell, is that we believe it began all the way back to the creation, before these organized religions that we see today. We feel like it was thousands of years before that, back when Adam and Eve, it started there, and God taught these principles. He, obviously there's intelligences in the animals. There's, all these things were created by God. And so that's, when we talk about religions, you say like 2,000 years ago, but before that, we feel like there was a set, when God created us, he had a pattern that he used and that he teaches, and principles that he teaches that are eternal. Some of the things we've been talking about, don't kill one another, things like, things that are eternal. He teaches those things, and he taught those things throughout, continued. And then one day, and of course we can get into the whole thing. I don't know how far you want to get into everything we believe, but anyway, people can go see what we believe. It's comingtochrist.org. If you want to go there, anybody that's interested, you can get all the beliefs. But I think whenever you're talking about religion, I don't know, it feels like it's just like when religions started or something, but to us, we feel like the doctrine of Christ was at the beginning. And then as mankind went on, and some started forming their own, getting away sort of from the full doctrine of Christ, and they start other religions and they start other things, and other things broke off from that. And there's a great apostasy and things like that we talk about in the Bible and stuff like that. But anyway, there's a whole thing there you can go into, but that's kind of, I don't know if that helps you understand where we're coming from on that aspect. When we talk about religion, we feel like that was something that was from the doctrine was from the beginning. Those things that we believe,
Well, yeah, for sure. So to clarify what I mean here, when I think of religion, I think of it as beliefs in the existence of a higher power or something of those kinds. And so I think that we can have science, and we can have healthcare and welfare, Social Security, helping others, and all of those things we can have without anybody ever believing there's a higher power. You don't need that at all. It's kind of superfluous. You can just get rid of the belief in a God altogether, and we can still have all of the benefits of science, all of the benefits of healthcare, Social Security, welfare, education, all those things. And so it seems like this belief in the existence of a higher power thing is just completely superfluous. We just get rid of it and keep these other things. And that's why I think they're separate entities. And so if we're trying to say, well, what is most important? If we're going to see a planet of people and say, well, what should we give them? Should we give them the religion thing, or should we give them the science and healthcare thing? I'm like, science and healthcare is way more important here. You don't even need the religion thing. It's kind of like the benefits that you're describing, as Kenny was describing, that there are these benefits to people's healthcare, welfare, well-being, all those kinds of things can be accomplished with these other things, science and welfare, without any mention of religion whatsoever. And I think it can be accomplished far better with these things without religion.
Let me ask a question though. I'm curious. So would you concede, Tom, that even if it's not necessary today, that at some point in the past that the religious belief or faith in some kind of higher power was crucial in order for these things to develop.
No, it wasn't crucial for them to develop at all. That we can know for sure, but it was beneficial. Like religious belief was very beneficial in many cultural aspects. You didn't need it to develop science. You didn't need it to develop healthcare. Those things had already existed in many forms prior to any kind of religious incarnation. But it was very beneficial in many ways as building a community, uniting a community, getting people to work together in certain circumstances. So religion was beneficial when it was incarnated, but it wasn't necessary for science or healthcare.
Okay, so I'd like to say something too. I know the morality of which there is a type of proto morality in animals, which we know with chimpanzees. There's a morality of cooperation in wolf packs, for example. There's like when a dominant wolf, when a wolf is challenged and the dominant wolf defeats the other one, the wolf lays on his back and he puts his teeth on his neck. And the vast majority of the time when he could kill the rival, he allows the rival to live. And there's things like that in nature that are a type of proto morality where we see animals behaving in a way that seems to imply some kind of moral or ethical framework.
Sure.
But what I'm curious about, I guess, with you, and the question that I like to ask atheists who consider themselves to be serious atheists is the whole framework that so there's okay, let me preface this by saying, number one, I've already said we agree that religion is not necessary for people to be ethical, for people to be moral. I know a friend who is very, very atheist, very much anti-religion, but there was several years ago, I was serving in a leadership position in my church, and I think Jackson probably remembers this story where we have the church building had one wheelchair and it was being used, and there was another member who had recently been released from the hospital but wanted to attend the service but didn't have a wheelchair to use. And so I got on Facebook early in the morning and said, hey, does anybody have a wheelchair that my church can borrow? And this guy spoke up immediately. It was like 6:30 in the morning. And he owned a tattoo shop downtown. And so I met him at his tattoo shop, and he loaned me the wheelchair, for the church. And it's, obviously he is very much against religion, but this is still a good guy, really good guy. I mean, I have a lot of respect for him. But the point that I get at is when people try to make the argument that you don't need religion isn't necessary for this morality, when you say, well, everybody knows not to kill and not to steal and not to do these things, a lot of people seem to have this belief that it's innate in us, but I would argue that it's not, because all the things that we take for granted are because our entire culture is built on that Judeo-Christian framework. And okay, I go back to, like, for example, the Vikings. The Vikings, when Christianity spread to Europe, in Britain, the reason that the Britons hated the Vikings so much is because they thought of them as almost demonic, because the Vikings would come and just plunder and pillage and kill the men and carry the women off over their shoulders, and they thought they were just horrible, awful people for doing this. But from the Vikings' perspective, they were acting ethically, because to be a good man means to be the best that you can possibly be, to be fully actualized in some way. Like, for example, a good wolf, the best wolf, we would say, is a wolf that can take down large prey, who do wolf things. And so the Vikings saw themselves as, if I am a man, and for me to be the best man that I can possibly be, I need to be the strongest. I need to be the most fearless. I need to be the most dominant. And so for them, when they invaded, they went into these churches and just started killing people. They weren't bad in their minds. In their minds, they were being ethical because they were being the best version of themselves that they should be, the way they saw it. So I guess all that is just to say that I feel like there have been competing views of what is ethical behavior and what's moral behavior. And I don't believe it's necessarily innate, even though we do see the proto-morality in certain animals. So I feel like making the assertion that we all have this innate morality, I don't see the facts bearing that out, I guess.
Well, there's a couple things there. I don't think everyone has an innate view of morality. There's obviously psychopaths and sociopaths who literally just their ability to feel morality has just been shut off of the brain, so they don't have that. But I think like if we look at cultures and evolution, that humans and social species do seem to have a tendency for objective morality. Not literally everyone has it, and people are going to have different expressions of it and different beliefs about it, just like there are different beliefs about any kind of like scientific truth. There's going to be a spectrum, but it seems like the consensus among humans is that there is a innate morality. I think like one of the two oldest religions, Jainism, which is doesn't believe in a god, is the most moral system of any religious system ever. It's absolute nonviolence. Anything that is living, conscious entity should not be killed. Flies shouldn't be killed. Spiders shouldn't be killed. They are the most moral of every single version of any moral system I've ever seen, essentially. And
Who
they don't
judges
believe
what's
in God.
moral though? When you say moral, that's a subjective claim, isn't it? So what is your
No,
foundation
I'm a moral realist. So I believe there is objective morality. Most philosophers who are atheists, like I think there was a recent poll of the Phil Survey's paper of academic professional philosophers, 72% are atheist, but 65% believe in objective morality. It means it's true independent of any opinion or society. It's something that's like true feature of
and
reality.
is that the perspective that you subscribe to then?
Yes, I'm a moral realist
Okay,
as well.
okay.
There's many different interpretations of what it might be. It's not a solved problem in philosophy or physics what morality is. I think it's a law of nature, kind of like gravity. There's just a moral feature of reality. It's like ingrained in the nature of nature, kind of a thing. I imagine it's similar to how you believe that morality is a part of God's nature. I just think it's a part of the universe's nature.
Okay.
But I think that we can see that in moral progress and the change of moral intuitions over time. We can see patterns that can illuminate that there is this thing out there. But I think that relevant to this conversation is the fact that the moral systems that we see that are the most moral don't come from religion or don't come from theistic religion. They come from like Jainist religion, which is very nonviolent, the most nonviolent. And it seems like because they value conscious agents, which seems to be the foundation of morality, is the valuing of conscious agents and not harming conscious agents to the greatest degree. They have the greatest grounds of morality, the most moral things. And so you used the example of the Vikings, implying that they are very immoral because they hack and kill and things. The
Well, my argument was
ideologies.
that they were not immoral, though. It means a different perspective. That's why I'm so the point that I was making is just that morality is subjective. If you don't have an undergirding principle throughout the culture, i.e., religion, then morality becomes subjective.
Well, religion as a feature of the culture is also subjective, so that wouldn't make it objective. What makes morality objective is if it's grounded in some object that exists independent of opinion. Obviously, most philosophers think that is the case. It's many different versions: Platonic objects, a priori abstracts, law of physics, kind of a thing. Lots of different interpretations of what makes something objective. Religion doesn't have any more grounds of objectivity than any other hypothesis. Every hypothesis can assert objectivity. And so positing religion as giving objectivity doesn't in any way have an advantage over a secular model of objectivity. But in relevance to, do we see a pattern of ingrained morality across human cultures? Well, yes. Like obviously there's a spectrum. Some people have more of it or less of it than others, but yes, they do seem to have this thing. And as we progress and gain more technology and less limitations of our resources, it seems to be expressed more and more as we go on. So as we continue to progress, we seem to have more inbuilt moral feelings about what is right and wrong, and more acceptance of other people and less imposing on other people. And that seems to be a very consistent trend. And so I do think there is a inbuilt pattern in humans to be moral that we see very clearly. There's lots of evidence of that. And the ones that seem to map onto the highest level of morality seem to be like Jainism and not religious ideologies. But of course, those are less successful because the ones that do conquer tend to spread more because of the whole conquering thing. But I think the relevant point here is that it doesn't seem to, you don't need religion for that. Religion isn't the origin of that. Religion isn't the one that does it the best. Religion just seemed to be the one that had this and also had the conquering aspect that made it spread more than any other one.
So I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess, I mean, I would be interested And like I say, it's hard to prove or disprove anything, but I would just be interested to know, like, what is your, like, how do you come to that conclusion? What is your why is that your conviction that religion's not necessary? I'm just for help me understand. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, what is that?
Well,
mean,
as
for
Kenny
you,
mentioned, there's these proto morality. So we can see this morality that developed in prior species, and it seems very similar to the
Okay.
origins of our own. And we can look at the history of moral frameworks and see that there are many moral frameworks that don't entail a god. For example, Socrates wasn't religious; he didn't believe in the gods. He was convicted as an atheist, and he had moral systems. They had moral systems in the Roman Empire. There were moral systems that, like the Jains, who don't believe in gods, and they have probably the most moral of the moral systems that we know of. And so we can see that both in the past and in the present today, there are moral frameworks, and they are completely independent from religious or theistic beliefs altogether. And there are moral frameworks in animals that have no religious beliefs. They don't have the capability of religious beliefs, as far as we can tell. And that, Kenny also mentioned the question of, are they innate? And we know from many different studies that there is innate knowledge in us. It's called there's the tabula rasa theory, the blank slate theory, that minds are just blank, and we develop as we grow.
Garbage.
Exactly. And so we've proven through many examples that there is inbuilt knowledge in us at birth, prior to any experiences. Like the most common example is the cuckoo bird. The cuckoo bird lays its eggs in another bird's nest, and when it hatches, it immediately pushes out all the other eggs. It can't see them,
Right.
doesn't know what they are. It just has this inbuilt desire to
Right.
push out the other eggs for some reason.
Okay.
And so we know that there are these inbuilt beliefs in animals towards certain things, and morality seems to be one of those things.
Okay.
So I would say, going back to your initial question of why do we believe what we believe. So when I started with my initial statement, there was 2 points that I fall back on. One, there is the practical, I guess, aspect, you could say, that we've been discussing, and that's the point that you say can't exist without religion. But there's also the second aspect of personal experiences I've had that cannot be explained, that seem to me to, and those types of things are very, very, very personal, and it's things that cannot be explained through any kind of logical framework. And so when I combine those two things together, for me, it makes me believe that, okay, I can see where you're coming from with the religious is, or the existence of God is superfluous to that, especially at this point in history where we have technology and we have the ability to study things. However, I've had personally that tell me that there is a God, that makes me believe that there is a deity, and believe it in such a way that even though I can't prove it or explain it, I cannot deny it, forces me to have to kind of marry those two things together. And I guess that's kind of what motivates me in my faith, is the combination of those two things. Because definitely when you take one, like if you take away the deep religious spiritual experiences that I've had, I could see myself going the other way. And another reason that I believe the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is true versus other belief systems is, you, for example, Tom, you seem to be a very sincere person. You seem to be a really good guy. Obviously, we don't know you that well. We've only talked to you for a little while, but there are many Christian denominations specifically that have a very, very clear doctrine that if you were to die today, that would say that you will be condemned to hell for eternity. You will burn in hell in eternal torment for now through all of eternity. And regardless of how good of a person you were, regardless of what your opportunities to hear about Christ were, then none of that stuff matters. And that's something that sets the church, the church, quote unquote, for us, apart. Another aspect that sets us apart from other beliefs, I think, and that we believe that God, who is our Heavenly Father, is just, infinitely just, in such a way that for someone like you, for example, who if you are, and obviously I don't know your heart, nobody can see inside your heart, but I believe that God knows our hearts. And if you are sincere and you are if you are living the best life that you believe is possible, then that does count for something. And people who have not had the opportunity to hear about Jesus Christ, or people who have had negative experiences with religion, or for whatever reason it is, that does not condemn you to hell necessarily. We believe that when we die, I know I've heard other people explain it, that, the moment you die, and I've literally heard preachers say this exact phrase, the moment that you die, you step into eternity, you step into heaven or hell, one or the other. And that's not how our theology works. We believe in a spirit world. So we believe when you die, you will step into the spirit world, but the spirit world is divided into paradise and spirit prison. And spirit prison is not eternal damnation necessarily. And we believe that people who are sincere, that at that point you will have an opportunity to accept Christ, and is that people who are sincere, who live the best lives they could, when they're presented with that idea and they understand it to be truth, then they will accept it as the truth. And so they will definitely have the opportunity. And so it is still, I guess we do still obviously hinge on our eternity being dependent upon Jesus Christ and are dependent on the work that he did. However, we also believe that good people are not condemned to hell, because no just God would do that.
So, question: the personal experience thing, I get that one a lot, but I struggle with personal experiences being reliable sources of information, because we know that the human brain is a terrible, terrible recorder of accurate data. If you have 10 different people testifying about what happened in a car crash, they're all going to see different things, and it's very hard to illuminate what is the truth behind those cases. And in the case of things that don't have an empirical basis, so miracles, magic, mythical creatures, paranormal, supernatural, UFOs, testimony in those cases are essentially immediately thrown out, both in history and in law. They're never treated as reliable sources of data, because the human brain is so unreliable that they're probably going to fill in those as explanations of anything they can't explain. But really, it should be treated as, this is something I can't explain, and then stop there. And so in the case of personal experiences, I find it hard to imagine that there is a way to justify, even to yourself, that experience was veridical and not just some kind of an illusion of the tens of thousands of illusions we have. And so I don't know if personal experiences are a reliable way to justify belief, because I've had personal experiences, spiritual ones, of seeing the future kind of a thing, where I had a flash or a vision of a scenery, and then months, weeks later, I'll have the exact same experience of it in front of me. And so it's as if it's like a premonition of the future. But that seems like it would be better for me to think that's something that could be explained by natural causes in the brain, rather than to say I can actually see the future.
So would you just attribute that to coincidence then?
Coincidence, sort of.
Okay.
I think I've studied enough into neurology that I know exactly what the phenomenon is, but I would, yes. If I did not know that, then yes, I would probably say this is probably more something coincidental, something about the brain I just don't understand yet. It would be better to put it into that category, rather than to say it's a spiritual access to the future, until I have some additional methodology, some additional means that I can test this. So I can say that if this is some access to the future of some kind, here's some test I can do to confirm it. And if I do the test reliably and repeatably, then I would be rational in believing that this was some access to greater knowledge of the world. But just the experience on its own does not seem like it's rational to believe I have access to the future. You need this additional method to get there. And I think that would be my worry about personal experiences, is unless you have that additional method, just the personal experiences on their own doesn't seem very reliable.
Yeah.
There's a scripture, and we believe also, another thing that sets us apart as this church, as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we have more scripture than other Christian churches believe. We have the King James version of the Bible, Old and New Testament. We also have the Book of Mormon, which is why people call us Mormons, just because of that. It's a nickname or whatever. So there's a scripture in Moroni. He was a prophet in that book. But he says this, he says, when you receive these things, and he's talking about, just you can apply it to anything in general. If you want to know something, in James, in the New Testament, James 1:5, he says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. He gives to all men up, liberally upbraideth not. I'm sure you're familiar with that scripture in your studies, with different things. But the thing about it is, it's like Kenny started off with. It's hard to prove or disprove any of this, with words or with intellect, or whatever. And it says this, and I'll just read the scripture that's in the Book of Mormon here. It says, I would exhort you that you would ask God, the eternal Father, in the name of Christ, if these things are not true, the things that, are they true or not? And if you ask with a sincere heart, with real intent, having faith in Christ, he'll manifest the truth of it unto you. I think that's where it starts. It's like, do you really truly want to know if there is a God or a higher power? If you have that desire and a real intent, that if you do feel that, most of the time it's not going to be a head thing. It's going to be a heart thing. You're going to feel something. It actually describes it in the New Testament, what you feel, like a burning in the bosom, or how, we teach that the Spirit can speak to us in many different ways. It can be an exciting feeling or whatever. But so when you feel that conviction, you act upon that and you go, okay, maybe, and you start to maybe look a little deeper and you go a little further and you continue. And to us, it's sort of not just a one-time, you just believe it and there's a lightning rod and boom, and now I know, and God is real and here we go. I think it's more of a real intent thing. What's your real intention? Do you really want to know if there's a higher power? Do you really want to know if there's a God in heaven or whatever? So you ask those things to that God, if you're there, I really truly want to know if you're there, and then just listen, just wait and listen, and however that comes about, whatever experience, but then you sort of continue to act on that. So to us, conversion, as we call it, conversion to, believing or whatever, is not just a one-time thing. It's continuous. In our podcast, we always say keep on striving, which to us, that what we're saying is just keep trying, keep pushing, keep going, keep doing good, keep being good to people. Those are great things. That's what, we need to be doing. That's the things that need to be happening. And so when it comes down to, believe in God, should there be religion? Is there really religion? Is there really God? It's really a very personal thing. It's a very one-on-one thing in our belief between us and God. It's not between me and my mom or me and my, it's literally between me and God, and that's it. But like Kenny said, there's just things that's happened in my life where I just cannot deny it. There's just no way I would go to the death. And it's just something that's very powerful for me. But that's not something because I'm who I am, or I feel like I'm the only one that can feel that. I think we're all God's children. We believe that we're all God's children, and so we believe we all have that opportunity to know those things. It's just really our desire and our intent. Do we really want to know or not? That's where we're coming from on our side, kind of what we believe and what we talk about and teach in our church.
Oh yeah, for sure. When I hear that though, I'm always concerned about confirmation bias, because I know how much of an impact that has on human psychology. So if you have that like emotional drive to want God to be there, or to desire looking for a God, you're far more likely to find it, or to see information that you'll interpret as confirming your belief, whether or not it actually is. And so I'm always looking for that objective data that isn't based on internal subjective perceptions, but we can verify in some way that show it's not just one of those 10,000 biases that we know all humans have, to be able to make it like a rational belief kind of a thing. And so I think I don't have a desire for there to be a God, but I do have a desire to know as many true things and as few false things as possible. And so in that context,
that's a good thing. Yeah, that's absolutely good. Yeah, that's a great thing.
Yeah, we actually, one of our beliefs, and Marcus referenced other scriptures that we have what's a book called the Doctrine and Covenants. In the Doctrine and Covenants, there's a scripture that references that the more knowledge and education that you gain in this life, the greater advantage you will have in the life to come.
Yeah, because you'll just be gaining, progressing. It just makes sense.
A desire to seek after there. So I've got a quick question for you. So we serve, we have a desire to go and bring as many people to Christ as possible, right? And obviously everybody has their own choice, and we don't, we're not interested in forcing that upon people. We simply invite, would you like to listen? Would you like to, come to church and, and experience what we experienced? And so as, on the atheist side, what do y'all have a similar goal? Like, is there a desire to bring as many people to atheism as possible, or not? Or
is that just sort of a personal preference type?
yeah.
We don't really care what people believe. We care about
Right.
the quality of their lives. So our goals are to improve as many human lives as possible. Like one of the ways is like eliminating religious bias from political stand. Like the Supreme Court has been heavily stacked with religious influences, and atheists would like to prevent that from happening, to try to keep us on the providing more healthcare, welfare, social security to as many people as possible, providing homes to the homeless for as many people as possible. And we are against political parties that try to stop that or limit that. And so the typical goal of atheists is to improve people's lives and freedoms to the highest extent possible without doing anything to harm anybody. So freedom to all consenting adults to do whatever they want, as long as it doesn't harm anybody else. That is more or less what we're trying to get to. Provide healthcare, housing, social security, give everyone the highest quality of life we can. Beliefs don't really matter. We don't really care about that as much.
Right. Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. How would you distinguish, or how do you see the differentiation between atheist and agnostic, Tom?
Depends which definition you're using, because there's multiple definitions. There's a colloquial definition and an academic definition. So like the academic definition of an atom is a particular combination of neutrons and protons and electrons, whereas the colloquial definition, or just the original definition of atom, was the smallest constituent part of all matter, which it's not. We know that there's smaller parts now. Same with the universe. Universe used to mean like all things, and now in science it means a particular space-time field. And so there's different definitions in the academic and the colloquial fields. I'm happy to use either one, because I'm pretty familiar with both. Academically,
so how do you see it though? I guess maybe that's part of the question that I'm curious about.
I'm happy to use atheism as a belief God does not exist. I think that's perfectly rational. Agnosticism is usually the position I don't know one way or the other, or don't have a position one way or the other. Those are typically the ways I use them, but I'm happy to use them as a lack belief, where atheism is the lack of belief in a God. That's also rational. Either one is fine with me.
Okay. And so I know I'm interested because of Marcus's or Jackson's question rather, because I know for me personally, I try really hard to understand other people's perspective, and so for me personally, agnosticism makes a lot of sense. I people who are serious agnostics, I generally have a lot of respect for. And I can have a lot of respect for people who are atheists. However, atheism in itself almost seems to, and I know you would disagree with this, because but almost be a religion unto itself, in that atheism seems to have its own set of dogmas, where you have and I think of people like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins, who are brilliant men. However, in my opinion, they are almost religious in their fervor for denouncing the existence of any God, rather than looking openly and being like, well, I don't know. I've never seen any evidence of God, so I don't really believe there is a God, but I'm would be open to the fact that maybe there is a God that exists if I saw evidence of it. So I guess that's what I'm curious about. Well, what in your life would push you past the point of agnosticism to having that surety that, the people, and I'm assuming you are obviously very intelligent. I mentioned people like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens that are brilliant men. However, I can say I disagree strongly with their positions.
Well, so I definitely identify as an atheist, and I think that my atheism is very similar to your theism, in that you think you have evidence that justifies your belief, and I think I have evidence that justifies there is no God, just like you think you have evidence that justifies there is a God. And so I'm not an agnostic; I'm an atheist. I think there is sufficient evidence to conclude God does not exist, and I think Hitchens, Harris, Dawkins, and Dinitz, their fervor for debating against God had more to do with the things that I think we can prove are wrong. So like the arguments they would argue against, cosmological, teleological, ontological, origin of life, those things, we can prove those are wrong. That's like done in the scientific field. And so we have very good reasons to be very, very frivolous about demonstrating those arguments are bad arguments. And their justification for their position was trying to argue against the consequences of religious belief. So for example, they all became very prominent after 9/11 when the Muslims crashed planes into buildings, and that action was very much inspired by religious belief. And so their goal was to try to denounce religious belief because of the catchphrase, believing absurdities can make you commit atrocities, kind of a thing. And so I don't think that their goal was to prove with 100% certainty God doesn't exist. It's like, that's not, I don't think I can do that. But I also don't think you would probably take the position that you can prove with 100% certainty God does exist. But that doesn't make you or me an agnostic. We both agree that I'm an atheist. I think it's probably the case God doesn't exist. And you're a theist. You think it's probably the case God does exist. And so the word agnostic is more of a position to describe someone who's like, I don't know one way or the other. But if we have a position that's like, I think God probably doesn't exist, I'm an atheist, even though I don't claim to have 100% certainty.
Okay.
Okay.
And so and part of the reason I ask is because you mentioned confirmation bias, and obviously that's something that, I work with a lot. And so one of the things that I've found and that I believe strongly and believe more strongly every day is that ultimately you have to make a decision about what you believe, because you can find just as much evidence for whichever way. Like, so especially within the church, if you start getting into Latter-day Saint apologetics, I know there's lots and lots of different, people of different Christian people who call themselves Christians, I could say, that try to denigrate the church, and they have all these horrible arguments, in my opinion, that really have no merit whatsoever. But ultimately, from what I've found is in my own studies, I've studied a lot of the quote unquote anti-literature and things like that. And the anti-literature that I've read and seen is just as unprovable as that to the contrary. So I feel like you have to, confirmation bias is real no matter how objective you claim to be or you want to be. And part of my belief is that ultimately you decide what you believe, because just like for me, for example, I feel like I know that I have confirmation bias and I actively seek out things that build up my faith, because I've made a decision because of, and once again, I noticed those personal experiences, those are subjective, and you can't, and the reason that I think that the reason I said those are personal is because they cannot be proven in any way. And so you cannot, there's nothing that I can say, if I described my experiences in the greatest detail I could, it would never convince you, because you understand the way the human mind works. And you say, well, I know that's what you think. But for people who have had very, very profound religious experiences, it communicates something that is undeniable, even though it's unexplainable. And so because of that, I understand confirmation bias and actively seek out things, because I've seen that you can find whatever you seek for is what you will find, I guess, is what I've discovered. And whatever it is that you think you believe or you want to believe, you will find evidence to back that up. And you'll find more and more and more evidence the more you look to back that up. So, I guess I feel like that's where I differentiate. And it was really interesting the way you described your atheism as similar to our theism, because, and I think there is an element of confirmation bias to that.
Well, I partially agree, but I think there is an objectively most rational interpretation of the data. I think, for example, if we're going to compare flat Earth versus round Earth, while you can use confirmation bias to make yourself a flat earther potentially, it is objectively the case that there is more evidence for a round Earth. There's
Yes.
significantly more. And I think the same thing applies to any claim that if you could be a computer, a perfect rational machine, you could look at the data and say, here is the most rational conclusion. And that's what I attempt to do. I attempt to just be a rational machine and calculate the data. And I think that when we do that, I think the atheist side is far more supported. So I agree that there is confirmation bias, and the goal of science and novel predictions of peer-reviewed papers is to omit those biases or find a way to overcome those biases, leaving only the objective evidence that it doesn't matter what your bias is, this is going to be there regardless, kind of a thing. I think that's the goal of what the atheist community is trying to attain.
Okay.
Interesting.
So I like taking away common ground. And one thing that I've taken away from this conversation that I wasn't aware of, you mentioning the kind of the reason or purpose behind the atheism, and that is to try and get basically the best out of everyone possible. And you believe that you can do that without having religion, without having faith in God. We want to do the same thing, try and get the best, absolute best out of everyone. We simply believe that is done most quickly through people adhering to the teachings of Jesus Christ, and really adhering to the teachings of Jesus Christ, not just professing his name. That there's a difference between just professing the name of Christ and then actually following him and following his teachings. So I like that we're basically on the same page when it comes to trying to develop strong communities and get the best out of people and them being good. So I really like that. The other thing that I have is I think your listeners are hilarious. They've been going up
I know.
it's been fun.
Yeah, I know. I keep seeing. My eyes keep darting over to the side. I mean, this has been a cool podcast. I mean, I appreciate you having us on. I mean, this has been
absolutely.
great.
I really appreciate you guys coming on. It was a great conversation.
Yeah.
And we've been going for about an hour and 20 minutes. We do have some questions from the audience.
Wow.
If you guys have time.
Okay.
All right. So Del Karu asks, in your moral framework, you've stated a rock falling. This is a question for me. A rock falling on a head is immoral. Where do you place the moral responsibility in the causal chain? I think that in a universe where it's possible to impose on another's will is an immoral universe. So I'd place it on the universe scale, and that we should a more moral universe would be one where it's not possible to happen. Big Bad Mama asks, how do they explain the Book of Abraham and the Kinderhook plates, which prove Joseph Smith was a fraud? I don't know anything about that.
That's Tom's? No, just kidding. No. Yeah. No.
So
actually,
those can be the whole Kinderhook plates is not there's nothing. There's no solid foundation for that. That's
totally fell through way back in the 1800s. I believe it was actually
that was proved to be false. Yeah, the whole Kinderhook thing is proven to be false long ago. And the Book of Abraham is an interesting one though, because that is more of a Kinderhook plates. We can throw that out automatically. That's the whole Kinderhook plates is just that was proven false long time ago.
That was even by the person.
That's nothing. The Book of Abraham, person that committed the fraud. Was admitted fraud. So anyway. Book of Abraham, though, however, is interesting. I've seen a lot of interesting discussion about that because what I'm assuming that Big Bad Mama is referring to is like in the Book of Abraham, one of the things, there's a facsimile and there's a description of what it's describing. And so this facsimile has apparently found in other contexts. And so what Joseph Smith claimed that the images depicting was not what the other archaeological evidence seemed to bear out. And the best, to my opinion, I've heard lots of different explanations for this. The thing that makes the most sense to me is that the Book of Abraham was not intended to necessarily be a literal translation. The way that Joseph Smith translated was sometimes literal translation, but sometimes was more through inspiration. And he could look at a thing and possibly come away with a message that might seem irrelevant to even from the original thing. for me, I feel it's kind of like I can see things in my life, and I can infer things. I can see something that'll inspire my mind in such a way that the thoughts that come to my mind might not have anything of direct relevance to the original item. However,
Right.
the original item can be credited with giving me the inspiration for the thoughts
Right.
that came from it.
Right.
So,
Gotcha. Next question is from Don Fullman. Couldn't we have strong community of people with appropriate epistemology? I think he means without religion, essentially.
I'd say, yeah. I mean, it's possible.
I think
it
it's
is.
possible. Yeah,
I think the only argument that I would make, though, and I know we've already talked about this, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, though, is that what we believe to be a kind of innate universal morality is actually something that is founded upon an ancient religious framework. And so we're kind of borrowing from that, even though we might not admit it or not like to think. So that's, and like I said, obviously we've already discussed that, and that's just my opinion. But yeah, I would say at this point, yes, it's possible. It's possible to have strong community without the religious
and the reason it would be a strong community, as we've stated before, like I say, I hate to keep beating this horse, but we don't like this horse. I don't know what's going on. No, I'm just kidding. No, but no, you know, as we, you know, a strong community comes from strong principles, strong, you know, good things, you know, and we believe those things come from God, our belief, right? And so yeah. So could you say, okay, there's no religion involved? Sure, on a, you know, you could look at it and say there's none of these churches, there's none of these people here that, you know, but in reality, if it's good, righteous, what we call good, righteous, right principles, we believe that does come from God. So when you talk about it that way, it eventually or ultimately it does come from what we believe come from God, those good principles. So there may not be an actual religion named, but if it's a good thing, you know, hey, don't rob from your neighbor. Hey, make sure this person gets health care. Hey, make sure this person, that's good things that Jesus Christ taught, that we believe he taught. Those are principles that he taught. And so, you know,
absolutely. And going back to something you said, Tom, when you were citing the nations that tend to be the most, the least religious, I guess, you know, how you cited their level of economic prosperity and health and all these other things. There's a whole, I don't even want to get into it because there's lots and lots and lots of reasons that those could theoretically that could theoretically explain that. And I don't think it's necessarily the religiosity or lack thereof that is causing that. There's lots of other factors in those situations. And so, yeah, definitely. It's like Marcus said. So it's not necessarily the religiosity or lack thereof that creates a strong community. But it is the good things. And the good things, quote unquote, what we believe are the things that we believe come from God.
Right.
Gotcha. Sebi asks, at the end, can we go around and ask each speaker who is the most intelligent academic they've ever read? My answer is Dr. Seuss.
That was mine. Wait a minute.
I can't beat that.
Yeah, I can't believe that. I Neil A. Maxwell would be mine.
Yeah.
That guy is a genius. I don't know. I mean, I'm not as well versed and studied as Tom and Kenny are and Jackson, but you know, what would you say, Kenny? I would be
remember. Listen, I'm the meathead of us three.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
I'm the meathead. We've already on our own podcast. I've already claimed that title. So
hey, that's why Kenny's on our podcast, man. You know,
that's interesting. So I'm kind of, my gears are spinning here, trying to think of who I would think, and it's hard to say because as I live and the more I read, that kind of changes. I know somebody that I'm really a fan of their work right now, and a lot of people it's a very divisive figure at the moment. That was Jordan Peterson. I'm a huge fan of Peterson's work, and I've listened to hundreds and hundreds of hours of his debates and lectures and things. And so right now he's probably my favorite at the moment. However, I mean, there's other, Neil deGrasse Tyson is amazing. You know, as far as when it comes to, you know, astronomy and physics is just, I actually read when I was in high school. I read Stephen Hawking's Universe, and it's hilarious because I was like so intrigued by it, but I'm sure I understood probably less than 10%, maybe 5% of what I read even had any meaning to me at all. It was so over my head, so incredibly over my head, but I just trudged through it. So cool, but I don't know what any of these words mean. It's almost like I'm reading a different language. It was so far over my head, but I was a big fan of Stephen Hawking until honestly, until I took an astronomy class in my undergrad, and my professor was NASA and had actually worked on several of the prominent telescopes now. And I'm having connection issues.
You come
but
back.
She recommended Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Mhm.
Okay, sorry about that. Am I back?
No.
Back?
Yep.
No, yeah. I mean, we heard you the whole time.
So yeah, so I was saying
or I did anyway.
I was a big fan of Stephen Hawking, but then so this professor was like, it was funny because she was basically like, Stephen Hawking is a flippin' blowhard. He's just whatever, she didn't have a very high opinion of Hawking. And she recommended, she said, if you really want to understand astronomy and you want to read somebody's work that will help you understand it, that you can actually wrap your head around. Yeah, she recommended Neil deGrasse Tyson. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is somebody, obviously I disagree with him when it comes to religious matters, but when it comes to matters of astronomy and physics, he's probably the top dog in my opinion.
Gotcha.
I'll at least give you the last book I read, finished it up about a month ago, and that is a book by a man by the name of David Goggins. Dude's a beast. Look it up. Book called You Can't Hurt Me. He's got another one coming out called Never Finished.
Yeah,
Marcus, did you want to?
You know what? As you talk about it, I do like Dr. Seuss. I do agree with that. That's a big one.
A.A. Milne's a big one too, though. I got to give props to A.A. Milne. So.
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind that I read that was super intellectual and just really good thought provoking was probably James E. Talmage. I know he's a member of our church, but he's also a writer and things like that, and he's got some really good stuff out there. But anyway,
cool. All right, next question is Don. What's a comment? These guys are really cool, though, very genuine and respectful for coming on the TjumpsChair and getting challenged. Thank you for the super chat.
Sweet.
No, I really
Thank you,
appreciate
Don.
it.
Yep.
Danny,
he said cool. He was talking about Marcus and Jackson.
No, you're the coolest, Kenny. You're the coolest kid in the room.
Okay, Ebola is from God. Who is that for?
Danny, wow.
So this is a question going back to where you said that there is the light of Jesus in all things, or that God's goodness is in all things, something along those lines. And so would this include Ebola?
Okay, so
yes,
can I comment on that? I really quick, I want to comment on that because this is another thing that I feel like differentiates us from many other religious groups, in that we do not necessarily believe that every single thing that happens in this world is a direct result of divine intervention. God does not cause horrible things to happen to people. People cause horrible things to happen to people because we have agency. And the greatest gift that God has given us is our agency, our ability to live our lives however we choose to. Sometimes the way people live their lives causes misery for others, and sometimes there's things that happen that just happen because they happen. It's funny, like my oldest son is a police officer, and he was, I don't know if I told y'all this, he was bitten on the shoulder by a police dog from, another officer had a dog. Wow. They were chasing somebody, and the timing worked out wrong to where, like, the other officer gave the command to attack, and the dog attacked, and my son happened to be running around the corner at the same time, and he took him out. I mean, he gnarled him up pretty good. And the thing is, it was nobody's fault. It wasn't there. Nobody in that situation did anything wrong. Nobody was to blame for that situation. It was just a matter of everybody did the dog did what he was supposed to do. The dog actually obeyed perfectly. He was given a command and he obeyed the command perfectly. It's just that he attacked the wrong person that he saw in his field of vision when he heard the command. So the way our world is, sometimes things just happen. And when bad things happen, when people and viruses develop, and it's not and causing horrible things to happen. It's because we live in a world that has so many flipping variables. There's an innumerable variables, and things just happen sometimes. And it can be so these bad things can be the result of other people's choices and actions, or it can be the result of just chance.
And we also believe that we're here to go through trials and tests and things like that. And when stuff like that happens, it's what are we? How are we going to react to that? Are we going to rise above it? Are we going to become better people before it? Are we going to try to help others? Are we going to, these are challenges that chat without challenge, there's no change. And we believe that we're supposed to change and become more and more. And so that and like Kenny's saying, this doesn't necessarily mean that God, like here's a roadblock right here, I'm just going to throw it in front of you. It's not necessarily that. It's just sometimes, like you said, some things happen, and it's how we deal with those things that ultimately matter.
Gotcha. All right. Vlad the Stoner asks,
I hope that answers the question.
I think it did. Vlad asks, can someone be a white supremacist and also a good Christian?
Well, let's see. What does it say? Let me see. If I'm a white supremacist, but also
it depends
a Christian,
on your definition of Christian.
Lover Christ, am I still a Christian?
There's a lot of people that I've debated with that call themselves Christians that do not fit my definition of what I personally believe a Christian is. So that's subjective.
So I believe
if you think that,
it gets back to what I'd said earlier about applying the principles of Christ and that he taught. And Christ does not teach and did not teach that one human race is superior to another.
Right.
Gotcha. All right.
As a matter of fact, he countered that pretty hard. Yeah.
All right. Winston's mom asks another question for LDS. Are the Mormons taught about Adam's first wife, Lilith?
First time I'm hearing about
easy
that.
Answer.
I've never heard that one. Have you heard that?
No, and that is in more of a Jewish, I think, almost folklore thing. It's not something. No, Lilith is not part of our theology.
No.
Okay.
Bless you.
All right. The nihilist asks, "What's your view on nihilism? On nihilism? Is it rational to be a nihilist? Why or why not? Thanks. I'd give money, but I'm a broke college boy." My view on
what's give money? I give money.
It's just a
I think nihilism is I think some people do view nihilism as rational, but I think nihilism is an irrational reaction to circumstances of the world. I mean, it's because I know I think it's a result of because I know a lot of people that are religious consider themselves to be more rational. However, from what I've seen and what I believe, often, not always, obviously, but often turning away from religion and from the religious foundation that our culture is built on leads to nihilism.
Yeah, I would agree to that.
I'd probably say it depends on the evidence you have on your epistemic foundation. So like if you think that there is no evidence of objective morality, then it's possibly rational to believe that nihilism is true.
Right. Yeah.
I think it kind of depends on like the evidence and what you think is evidence of morality and what you think it would require for evidence.
Right. Your point of view, basically. Where are you really at on that? It's so many variables there. It seems like that
could be a whole nother podcast episode.
Yeah. I mean, that's
Gotcha. Robert Hamilton asks, how did they interpret their personal experiences as something supernatural? How is God activity accurately recognized as such?
Something supernatural. How did they interpret their personal experiences as something supernatural?
That is something that I feel like I'm dominating the conversation here, but
go ahead,
I feel like that's a point that I've been harping on through this entire conversation is the fact that it's not something by definition that can be objectively, that you can communicate to another person, that it's not something you can transfer to another person, because those personal religious experiences are so, if you have one, and it's sad because I know like my son that I was talking about, he is, I'm not sure if he considers himself an atheist or agnostic. I think he is an atheist at this point, and he is very similar. I mean, he's obviously, I mean, he's really smart kid, and he's similar to Tom in a lot of ways. That, you know, we had a conversation one day. We were sitting at the dinner table, and I was sharing with him my experiences, and I shared an experience of what to me was that irrefutable, you know, quote unquote. And he looked at me and said, "Well, Dad, I've never had that kind of experience." And okay, you know, if you haven't, then there's no way to understand it.
Yeah. If you haven't experienced godly type things, then it is hard to recognize. Obviously, you're not going to recognize those things as such. But yeah, it's like just trying to describe what the wind looks like or something, or describing that the wind is real, but it's because I can't see it. And, well, how do you describe it? I don't know. I mean, I can tell you how it feels, but until you receive it yourself, it's really hard to get that across. You know, it's just super, which is why you can't really, which is why a person like myself can't convince somebody of God. You know, that's not but we do believe in the Holy Ghost. We believe in God, the eternal Father. We believe in Jesus Christ, and we believe in the Holy Ghost. And we believe that the Holy Ghost is a personage of spirit that can influence and can touch other people and help them feel truth, because that's his job, is to reveal truth and to reveal those things. So it's by the power of the Holy Ghost that we're able to feel those things. Like I say, those things as described in the scriptures could be anything from a feeling of burning in your chest to joy or peace or something, but it would be very what's the word I'm trying to think of? It would be something that's very important to you, something that's very noticeable to you, that lets you know that is coming from God. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be just something generic, right? So
only the closest thing that I could to is, especially from a more naturalistic perspective, would be the experiences of people. Some people have described from psychedelics. I know there's people who you know, use of, you know, ayahuasca and other things and DMT have described situations that they describe as even more real than reality. And, you know, it's for someone who's never had that type of a psychedelic experience, you know, they say, "Oh, that was all in your mind," to say, no, dude, it wasn't in my mind. The person that I talked to was even more real than you are right now. And that sounds kind of crazy, but for those who have had, you know, deeply profound religious experiences, that's the only other closest thing I can compare it to. Is this something that's so real, it might sound crazy to everybody else, but when you experience it, it's so real to you that you know it's real, even if every other person on the planet tells you you're wrong. And it's just how it is.
Gotcha. Tim West, thank you for the super chat. I know it's not possible, but if humans somehow discovered that there was no God with 100% certainty, how would that change how you lead your life?
Very little, probably. Because I would still want to live. That's one thing, actually, somebody brought that up one time. There's something to that effect of, well, what if you die and you find out there really was no God, there was nothing? And I'd be like, well, I lived a very happy, wonderful life where I served others. I tried to uplift others. I lived in a way that I felt joy. I felt happy. So I don't see why there would be a reason for me not to do, like you tell me, you come, you know, however I would know that God is not there or whatever, and it was 100% certainty, then I don't see what would I then do opposite of that. You know, I wouldn't want to just lay in bed all day, or I don't know, or go out and start killing people because, hey, freebie, you know, go live crazy, you know, or whatever.
Might have me a good Budweiser or something like that.
Yeah. You know, something like that. Just get lit, you know, I guess. I had those psychedelics you're talking about. Where are those at?
There might be some changes, but yeah,
right,
overall,
right. But overall, I mean, the core principles wouldn't change for the way I live my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was saying for me, is that, you know, the path that I've chosen for myself right now is, from what I've seen, I don't, you know, this world doesn't have anything better to offer as far as personal happiness and joy. and fulfillment and all of the things that. So yeah, I mean, and obviously that's objective, but for the path.
And I think that's a great point, you know, to think about, is that that's one of the big things in our religion. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is really big on, you know, for yourself that this is the truth. The bishop on Sunday cannot convince you. If you're going to live off of borrowed light, it's not enough. You know what I mean by that? Someone else's testimony, that's not enough. I've seen people do it in the church that are no longer in the church. They leave, they go do something else. They never truly have their own personal conviction, which is what we talked about, you know, that feeling of the Holy Ghost that really puts it in. Also continuing to do and practice the principles that Jesus taught. But so, you know, I mean, that's important, you know, that we keep doing those things that we know for ourselves. And that's one of the things, like I've talked about before, we have to ask God. We have to, you know, really start up a conversation with him and get to know him personally, and really ask him, you know, are you there? Are you really there? You know, I want to know if you are truly there, then let me know, what can you do, or what can I do to figure out that you're really there, and let's go from there. But you know, that's the thing. So you talk about 100% certainty. It's important to say that, you know, you almost have to have sort of a 100% certainty to do something, you know, or not. If not, you're not going to get out of bed. You know, I got to have 100% certainty I'm going to get my paycheck at the end of the week. If not, yeah. I'm going to do something else. You know what I mean? So, but 100% is hard to describe, because we are in continuous learning and growing and finding out new things. You know, so I think I would probably change very little, just going back to the question, you know.
Gotcha. The next question is from Travis Statham. If all religions are true, or if only LDS Church is true, and how the feeling of the bosom isn't the same between them all. And while you're answering this, I desperately need to go to the bathroom, so I'll be back in 1 minute. So go.
Okay. Okay. No problem. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll take the lead on this one. You know, are all religions true? I would say that there is truth in all religions. If you're talking about, as we've talked in this podcast, as you talk about doing good things, good things. If you teach that stealing is bad, that's truth. If you teach that, you know, praying to a higher power for help, to help guide us, that's truth. There's truth there. What the difference is for our church is that we believe in the same organization that existed in the primitive church. Namely, when Jesus Christ came down, he was born in Bethlehem, and he grew up, and he established his church with apostles, prophets, you know, preachers, evangelists, all these things in his church. He organized it in a way. Paul talks a lot about it in the New Testament. So we believe that we are that same church that he created, because we also believe, as you get into the, it was talked about in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, about an apostasy. In other words, there would be a great famine. You know, Amos talked about it, and some others talked about it, the great famine that would happen when there would be the church would be taken away, the authority, the priesthood authority, all those things would be taken away. That same church, after all the apostles were killed, specifically around that time, the ones that Jesus called in Jerusalem, when they were all killed off, and so that authority was lost. And during that time, there was no set pattern in what happened. There was many different churches that just sort of trudged on and kept going with the good that they had, even though that actual authority that was given to Peter and to James and John and all that had been lost with those when they were killed off. And so that famine was in the land, as it says, as Amos said, the famine in the land was actually, the word of God was not complete. There wasn't complete truth. And so we believe in the restored church. We believe that through the prophet Joseph Smith in 1820, when, you know, he went out and he prayed and was trying to figure out the truth. There was so many religions around him. I'm sure you can look up the story and all that. But so we believe that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the literal Church of Jesus Christ, the one that he established, that has the completeness that it needs, everything that we need to know and everything that we need to do, all the ordinances and principles that we need to be able to go on and gain exaltation, gain salvation, and all those things. But yeah, that feeling in the bosom, yeah, I mean, you're going to feel that. Truth is truth anywhere. Anytime there's truth, the Holy Ghost can confirm that, and you can feel that, sure, in any religion. Absolutely.
Yes. So we definitely feel like if you can be in any church or any religion and have the Holy Spirit testify to you something that is true.
Absolutely.
And I want to say one thing. I feel like that this is a really good question that Travis is getting at, and I don't know if this is exactly what he's getting at, but I think the feeling in the bosom not being the same as far as if we pray to know if the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is indeed what it claims to be, as far as being the true church that Jesus Christ established on the earth when he was here and restored. Because there's the church is honestly the fastest growing Christian denomination, fastest growing religion on earth still today. It's kind of comes and goes, but I think it's generally about 200,000 convert baptisms per year. It's been, it's kind of went up and down, but it's been fairly consistent for quite a while. And I believe that I believe that God is truth, and he doesn't lie. He doesn't tell one person one thing and another person something else. So I believe if any person were to pray with a sincere heart, if these things are true, then they would receive a spiritual confirmation that it isn't. And I know some people say that they have, and they received confirmation otherwise. And I can't explain that. I don't know. I don't know what's in their hearts. I don't know if they're not telling the truth, but I know there's some people that believe something differently, just as strong as I believe what I believe. And that's the beautiful thing about our religion, is that we respect the right of people to believe whatever it is they believe.
As a matter of
fact, we don't necessarily believe you're going to go to hell for eternity because you don't believe exactly as we do.
No, but there even, there's a thing that Joseph Smith wrote. It's the Articles of Faith, and there's 13 articles that he wrote. It's just sort of it was in response to some people that wanted to know what exactly what are your beliefs, and so he wrote this little thing for a newspaper article. But number 11 says, we claim the privilege of worshiping Almighty God according to the dictates of our own conscience, and allow all men the same privilege. Let them worship how, where, or what they may. So we believe in freedom of religion. I mean, you want to be atheist, be atheist. You want to be Baptist, be Baptist. We're not going to, it's not our job to go out and start grabbing people by their necks and saying, get over here. What are you doing? You're crazy. I mean, that's not how Jesus Christ would do it. That's not how he did it. He didn't go around forcing people to believe him. He invited them, coming to me, if you didn't, you didn't. I mean, it's not like he went and just slapped them upside the head and said, or whatever. But so, that's one of the things. So yeah, there's truth in all religions, all Christian religions, anybody that's doing good, that's truth, that's good, So, but that's the only difference is that we believe that. I think it was said, I don't know where it was said or what, it was one of the leaders of our church. I don't know how long ago or what, but it was something to the effect of, bring what truth you have, bring the things that you know and the things that you believe, and let us add to that, because we feel like this is the restored church. It's not because we think we're smarter than everybody else. We just believe that Jesus Christ established one church, and it was lost for so many years whenever that authority was taken. All the apostles were killed and stuff, and it was actually prophesied about in the Old Testament in Amos and things like that. And then it was restored. It was restored back in these last days, which is why we call ourselves the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We believe these are the last days before his second coming, is what that means. So,
gotcha. We got two questions now about horses.
Oh, really?
Good question asks, horses in America with the Nephites. The Spaniards
Nephites.
brought horses, Nephites, horses after Columbus discovered America. And the second one is, ask if there were horses in America before the Columbus. Did
they just not prove this?
There's been a very recent archaeological discovery, because it's been believed for a long time that there were no horses in pre-Columbian North America. There were horses anciently, but that supposedly died out I think it was around the Ice Age. But the predominant theory has been that there were no horses in North America pre-Columbian. However, I've seen the articles about that. There's recent archaeological evidence that seems to prove to the contrary now, to contradict that, and it appears now that there is archaeological evidence to show that there were horses in the Americas
during that time that
during
they
that
said they
time.
were during the Book of Mormon time. Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Super chat from Charles and Solo. What method do you use to differentiate imagination from reality? What kind of new predictions about something we don't know can theism lay claim to?
What method do you use to differentiate imagination from reality? Pray, ask God, listen to the Holy Ghost. I don't know. I mean, you know, what do you say to that? Yeah, it's like imagination from reality.
It depends. That's a very complex question, I feel like, because, you know, we talked about how you define words, and I mean, this is not a cop out, but honestly, I feel like
No.
how you define imagination and how you would define reality could have a huge impact on how
These
that
words
question could be answered.
I think these
Because
words blanket.
imagination can become reality.
Yeah, it could.
You kind of, okay, for me, I know I work
Yeah.
so I work in mental health, and I can't tell you how many times I've worked with individuals who, I actually work on a crisis unit, and there's several times individuals have come in who are in what I see as the very initial stages of the development of schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. And it's sad to me, because these people come in and they're like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, you don't understand, because, you know, this thing I saw or heard, it's real. It's not, I'm not crazy. I'm not like these crazy people, blah, blah, blah. And it's interesting because they don't understand how hallucinations work. And for a person who experiences hallucinations, something that if you took two people and put them in MRI, and you looked at one person, if you had a person A who was being shown a video that had picture and sound, and their brain was reacting to the stimuli, and you had person B who was experiencing visual and audio hallucinations, the brains would be activated exactly the same. And that's the thing. For these people, it is reality. And so it's a really hard, it's a difficult thing to, what is imagination? What is reality? It's hard to say. It's hard to define what that is, because our brains construct the reality that we experience. And
look at that second part, Kenny. It says, what kind of new predictions about something we don't know can theism lay claim to? So it's kind of like that thing you kind of guess about something, or maybe someone says something. I don't know exactly.
Well, I'll give my answer. So the way I differentiate imagination from reality was with novel testable predictions, the ability to predict something we don't know about the world yet that we will experience in the future and get it right. And that is if you can do that, whatever model can do that is a good reason to believe it's describing reality and not just our imagination, because our imagination is very bad at predicting the future.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that was
good. I have a question to you, man.
Yeah.
Well, this is like a statement from my channel. It's a well-known thing I always say is, how do you differentiate imagination from reality? So Charles knows my answer. He's asking about you guys.
Okay.
So yeah, the predictions, I guess that would be maybe fall under the category of prophecy or somewhere. So I'm not sure if, like, maybe Tom, you're talking about climate change models, like, you know, that's a big hot button issue right now, as I know within climatology, the models, you know, there's a lot of people that are showing that, you know, the climate change models are predicting X, Y, and Z, and there's a lot of debate about that. But the science we have is generally the best tool we have to discern that. And so when it comes to theism, I mean, the only answer I would know is to look at prophecies that have been fulfilled. And when prophecies are fulfilled, one of the prophets, so for example, in the Doctrine and Covenants, a prophecy that was given by Joseph Smith before the Civil War was, he predicted the Civil War, and he actually predicted that prophesied that South Carolina would be the first state to secede from the Union. And it turned out to be correct, that South Carolina was indeed the first state to legally secede from the Union.
Yeah. And he died way before the Civil War started. But yeah, there's just, I mean, things are usually written in the scriptures. As far as the predictions or the prophecies about something we don't know, can theism lay claim to? It's just that thing that you just look at it and see, and you just have to ask yourself, did the prophets merely guess right, or is there some kind of higher power there, which that goes back to you have to find out for yourself and really get pray for that with real intent if you really want to know if that's God doing those things, so anyway.
Gotcha.
I hope that answers you, Charles.
Yeah, that was a good question.
The last super chat I got is from Keith Tibbetts. Why is the temple ceremony copied from the Freemasons?
That's a good question.
Good. Yeah, that's a really
great question.
Good question.
Who
wants to tackle that?
Well, I'll jump in. Okay. So during the time of Joseph Smith, when the temple ceremony things were revealed to him, there's things that we do in the temple. They're sacred things. They're not secret. They're sacred though. And so we don't just tell everybody about it, but there's a process for you to be able to do those things. Obviously, you become a member of the church. I don't know why you'd want to do it if you weren't a member of the church anyway. But anyway, but the temple ceremony during the time Joseph Smith, and help me with this, Skinny or Jackson, many of the founding people,
also
many of the founding people during that time, during the restoration of the church, were Freemasons. They practiced those ceremonies. They had ceremonies and things. And so they would adopt some of those things from Freemasons to help them in teaching the principles that the Lord gave them in the temple. So it's not so much that a lot of anti Mormons or whatever you want to call them, they'll say that Joseph Smith made it up from Freemason stuff. And in reality, it was just that he utilized some of those ceremonies from Freemasons, because if you really want to dive into it and really go back, you can look and see where the Freemasons came from Knights Templar and things like that, which were the ones that looked over Solomon's temple. And if we are the religion that claims to have the restored gospel or the restored church, then you can go all the way back to Solomon's temple, and there was a temple built there. And you look at our temples today, perhaps some of those things that these later on Freemasons picked up were picked up from actual temple ceremonies. So who's to say it was not the Freemasons that took from temple ceremonies, because of these Knights Templars, which were ones that watched over the temple, so they probably knew temple ceremonies. So
that's
to say that these ceremonies possibly could be far more ancient than Freemasons. So one way or the other, I mean, you
hit the 2 points that's the two main points that I was thinking too. We believe, just as the Freemasons do, that the ceremonies are ancient, that they're two different things that have a kind of a common ancestor, the way the humans and chimpanzees have a common ancestor theoretically. It's like kind of these two ceremonies have a common ancestor,
right?
And they're not necessarily copies from each other. That they used the tools they had, because the temple ceremonies for us are about covenants we make with God. And so they would have used whatever tools they had at their disposal to you. And so, it could have, if there was something other than Freemasonry that filled that same niche at the time, it could have been something else. It could have influenced the temple ceremony.
And I will say that some of those ceremonies have changed even in recent years. And it's not that the doctrine's getting changed. They're not taking away the principles or the doctrine. They're just taking away some of the ways that things are done, in the temple. So to make it more, because there's so many more members of the church today. And so there's so many more people going through the temples. They have to speed up the process. They have to do things, and there's things that are taken out and things that are done differently so that it can be done more mainstream and a little bit quicker and maybe even understood a little bit better and easier, distributed easier. But none of the basic doctrine is taken out. It's just there's things that are streamlined and things like that. So, but I mean, that's a great question though. It's a really cool question.
Awesome. So we've been going for about 2 hours. Really appreciate you guys coming on.
Hey, this has been a blast, man. No doubt. This is great. We loved it.
Definitely.
Yeah, we appreciate you having us on, Tom. Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's stimulating conversation. I love it. It's I love it. I mean, I'm real impressed with your podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you having us on, reaching out to us.
For sure. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your night. I'm going to get off and get some food, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Yeah,
good.
I appreciate it,
Saints in the South. Check us out on YouTube.
Yeah, check us out.
Saints in the South. You want to check us
out? Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it, Tom.
Keep on striving.